This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore. Donald Trump has laid bare for the world the cowardice of those who remain in the Republican Party. He has made obvious their willingness to toss aside principles of liberal democracy when their places in power are threatened. It has never been so clear that when they are losing in the marketplace of ideas, they have zero problem subverting democracy to enforce the terrible values for which their party has become synonymous. And other than Donald Trump, there's probably no person in American politics more culpable for these charges than is Mitch McConnell. He is a malignant force on the body politic of these United States, a cancer that desperately needs to be excised. He's a tumor in human form, a tumor whose wretched, destructive influence is spreading throughout our nation. He has taken the chamber of Congress, which used to be held up as the more reasonable one of our two houses, the more deliberative, the United States Senate, and he has turned it into a hospital ward where legislation goes to die. Measures pass the House, and then Mitch McConnell doesn't even allow them to be debated on in the Senate, blocking them from any chance of even being considered. Legislation like H.R. 1, the For the People Act, a sweeping package of pro-democracy reforms that aims to make it easier, not harder, to vote, end the dominance of big money in politics, and ensure that public officials work for the public interest. H.R. 5, the Equality Act, a measure to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation in federal law. H.R. 7, the Paycheck Fairness Act, legislation to empower women to challenge pay discrimination in the workplace, which passed the House with bipartisan support. H.R. 8, the Bipartisan Background Checks Act, legislation to enact the common sense, widely supported expansion of background checks for gun purchases, which passed the House with bipartisan support. H.R. 1585, the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, which passes the House, again, with bipartisan support. H.R. 1644, the Save the Internet Act, legislation to restore net neutrality, which passed the House with bipartisan support. All of these Mitch McConnell has stopped. But most egregious is his dedication to thwarting any and all efforts to strengthen our election security against the ongoing efforts from dangerous enemies like Russia's Vladimir Putin of repeating in 2020 what he was able to accomplish in 2016. Last Wednesday, former special counsel Robert Mueller testified before the House Judiciary and Intelligence Committees about the findings of his investigation and was asked specifically whether or not Russia is planning yet another attack on our democracy.
Is this, in your investigation, did you think that this was a single attempt by the Russians to get involved in our election, or did you find evidence to suggest they'll try to do this again?
No, it wasn't a single attempt. They're doing it as we sit here. And they expect to do it during the next campaign.
Well, the day after Robert Mueller confirmed under oath that Russia was still a threat to us, the House of Representatives passed two bills to greatly strengthen our election defenses from foreign hostile enemy interference. Bills which included requirements for campaigns to report to federal authorities any attempts by foreign entities to interfere in our elections, and requirements for states to use individual, durable, voter-verified paper ballots during federal elections, paper backup ballots as a safeguard from any hacking attempts. These bills also appropriated an additional $600 million, which is just a start, to help states enhance election security. Now, I would love to stand here and tell you that these bills left the House and breezed through the Senate onto the White House for the president's signature. I can't say that, though, because Mitch McConnell blocked them. Mitch McConnell stood in the way of defending our nation from another attack. An attack we know is coming. That is treason. No matter how you shake it, being in a position to guard against an attack from an enemy we know to be coming and instead doing nothing is providing aid and comfort to that very enemy. And the other day on MSNBC, former Republican congressman and current host of their morning program, Joe Scarborough, questioned why Mitch McConnell was so intent on harming our country.
The most shocking thing about this is that Robert Mueller testified that not only did Russia try to interfere with our 2016 election, and not only did Donald Trump's, all of his intel community, and Kirstjen Nielsen, when she was the Homeland Security, said Russia undermined American democracy in 2016. We remember back then the warnings came, but Moscow Mitch, that being Mitch McConnell of Moscow, Kentucky, actually blocked that and said he threatened the people that were going to try to get that information out to warn Americans. Now we have, almost 4 years later, the same warnings coming not only from the independent counsel, which 60% of Republicans believe ran a fair investigation, Republicans. We now have the Intel Committee in the Senate run by North Carolina Republican Richard Burr, saying what? That the Russians tried to infiltrate all 50 states in 2016 to undermine American democracy and to undermine a free and fair election. And on the same day, Willie, Moscow Mitch blocks 2 bills that would actually protect us from a Russian invasion in this area.
Well, this set Mitch McConnell off, so much so that he raced to the Senate floor to register his outrage and offense and to defend himself. Wait, sorry, wrong clip.
It started with the angry lies on MSNBC. The host lied and said that I've dismissed Russian interference in our 2016 election as, quote, a hoax. Of course, I've never said any such thing, ever. I've spoken extensively and often about Russia's unacceptable interference in 2016. I've constantly discussed all we've been doing to correct the Obama administration's failures to respond more assertively to the Russian threat, including on election security. So, Mr. President, let me make this crystal clear for the hyperventilating hacks who haven't actually followed this issue. Every single member of the Senate agrees that Russian meddling was real and is real. We all agree that the federal government, state governments, and the private sector all have obligations to take this threat seriously and bolster our defenses. Claims to the contrary, claims that anybody here denies what Russia did on President Obama's watch, are just lies. Not partisan distortion, not clever spin, just total fabrications.
So let's address Mitch McConnell's nonsense. First, let's start with his fondness for pointing out that the Russian attack came during the 2016 election when Barack Obama was president of the United States. Not shockingly, he fails to mention that in September of 2016, Obama went to him to address the Russian election meddling in a unified, bipartisan front, and he declined. According to reporting from the Washington Post, quote, in September, during a secret briefing for congressional leaders, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell voiced doubts about the veracity of the intelligence, according to officials present. According to several officials, Mitch McConnell raised doubts about the underlying intelligence and made clear to the administration that he would consider any effort by the White House to challenge the Russians publicly as an act of partisan politics. He considered any effort to challenge the Russians publicly partisan politics. So listen, Mitch, you can shut that hole above your flapping neck waddle. You've known about Russia's attack on America before the 2016 election. You've known about it since then and have done nothing. Now we are approaching a repeat performance and you're still doing nothing. Doing nothing when your own Republican-controlled Senate Intelligence Committee's report on Russian election interference found that Russia targeted the election systems of all 50 states. Reading from the Republican Senate Intelligence Committee's report, quote, Mr. Daniel told the committee that by late August 2016, He had already personally concluded that the Russians had attempted to intrude in all 50 states, based on the extent of the activity and the apparent randomness of the attempts. Quote, my personal judgment was we have to work under the assumption that they've tried to go everywhere because they're thorough, they're competent, they're good. And intelligence developed later in 2018 bolstered Mr. Daniels' assessment that all 50 states were targeted. So your refusal to do anything translates to an invitation. But why should that surprise anyone when your master, Donald Trump, has done so, except with more direct language?
And then the report comes out, and they didn't even say, they hardly even talked about it.
Should he have gone to the FBI when he got that email?
Okay, let's put yourself in a position. You're a congressman. Somebody comes up and says, hey, I have information on your opponent. Do you call the FBI? I don't think.
Coming from
I'll tell you
Russia,
what,
you do?
I've seen a lot of things over my life. I don't think in my whole life I've ever called the FBI. In my whole life. You don't call the FBI. You throw somebody out of your office, you do whatever you do.
Al Gore got a stolen briefing book. He called the FBI.
Well, that's different. A stolen briefing book. This isn't a stolen. This is somebody that said, we have information on your opponent. Oh, let me call the FBI. Give me a break. Life doesn't work that way.
The FBI director says that's what should happen.
The FBI director is wrong.
Your campaign this time around, if foreigners, if Russia, if China, if someone else offers you information on an opponent, should they accept it or should they call the FBI?
I think maybe you do both. I think you might want to listen. There's nothing wrong with listening. If somebody called from a country, Norway, we have information on your opponent. Oh, I think I'd want to hear it.
You want that kind of interference in our elections?
It's not an interference. They have information. I think I'd take it. If I thought there was something wrong, I'd go maybe to the FBI, if I thought there was something wrong. But when somebody comes up with Oppo research, right? They come up with Oppo research. Oh, let's call the FBI. The FBI doesn't have enough agents to take care of it. But you go and talk honestly to congressmen. They all do it. They always have. And that's the way it is. It's called Oppo research.
Requiring a paper ballot because of its intrinsic security isn't partisan. It's common sense. Requiring candidates or campaigns to call the FBI if foreign adversaries attempt to interfere by offering dirt on an opponent isn't partisan. It's patriotic. Fully funding the nation's election security infrastructure isn't partisan, Mitch McConnell. It's a necessity.